At 34,000 feet, somewhere above the quilted whites and grays of the Colorado Skies, Flight 287 glided through calm air like a floating city. The cabin lights were dimmed to a warm amber glow, most passengers either watching movies, scrolling phones, or gently dozing. Among them, curled against the cold airplane window of seat 18A, was 11-year-old Brooke Tanner, fast asleep with her knees tucked under her hoodie, her small fingers clutching a worn-out pair of pink headphones. She had fallen asleep mid-cartoon, screen frozen on a bright scene that contrasted sharply with the quiet tension building throughout the aircraft, tension she didn't yet feel. To her, the world was warmth, safety, and the faint vibration of metal and wind humming beneath her cheek. Outside, the sky was so clear that the sun carved a bright path across the wings, reflecting a sharp white line straight into the cabin. Flight attendants whispered as they rolled carts through aisles, careful not to disturb those sleeping. Somewhere a baby whimpered and was hushed by a tired mother. A businessman in 17C typed furiously on a laptop while muttering numbers under his breath. It was an ordinary flight. Ordinary, right up until the moment it was. A sharp, metallic ding split the hush of the cabin. Brooke stirred, not enough to wake, just enough to shift her cheek and frown slightly in her sleep. A second ding followed, louder, sharper, more urgent. People lifted their heads. The businessman paused mid-sentence. A teenager pulled off one headphone. And then the intercom clicked on. Usually the captain's announcements carried a soothing cheer, whether updates, arrival times, or the classic sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. Not this time. The captain's voice came out low, strained, and edged with something that instantly tightened the air. "Fear. Ladies and gentlemen," he began, clearing his throat, "this is the captain speaking. A pause, a long one, too long. I need to ask, is there any fighter pilot on board?" Passengers didn't react at first. The words didn't make sense. Fighter pilot on a commercial flight. Brooke blinked awake, sitting up too fast as her headphones slid off her shoulder. Her heart thudded, maybe from the surprise of waking, maybe from something deeper, something instinctive, something she didn't fully understand. The cabin turned electric. Murmurs rippled across the rows. Did he just say fighter pilot? What kind of question is that? Is this a joke? Why would they need that? The baby who'd been quiet moments before now burst into a cry, a piercing one that added pressure to an already tightening atmosphere. Brooke rubbed her eyes. The air felt wrong, pressed down, like the atmosphere right before a storm breaks. She pushed her face closer to the window and squinted at the wing. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for, but she did know the sound of a healthy engine. She'd heard it 1,000 times sitting beside her father at the base, watching jets line up for takeoff. This wasn't that sound. The left engine hummed too aggressively, vibrating in a strange rhythm, like it was gasping for breath. Even at age 11, Brooke recognized the faint metallic oscillation beneath the hum. Her heart skipped. No, not this. She pressed a palm against her chest where a necklace, a silver dog tag on a thin chain, rested under her hoodie. Her father's dog tag. She wore it every day, even though most people told her it was too big for her, too heavy. But right now it grounded her. The intercom crackled again. "Please, if there is any fighter pilot, or anyone with military aviation experience, please notify the crew immediately." No cheerfulness, no composure. Just raw, unfiltered fear threaded through every syllable. Brooke inhaled sharply, the sound loud in her ears. She wasn't imagining things. That subtle whine under the engine's steady hum, she'd heard it once before. In a hangar. With her father. During a training demonstration on engine failures. She had been only 9, sitting on a folding metal chair kicking her legs while her father explained things he said she'd never need to know. but she loved anyway. He pointed to diagrams, letting his large, calloused finger tap the image of a compressor valve. "If you ever hear a faint spike like this," he had said, imitating a metallic screech with his voice, "it means the engine's starving its intake, usually fixable, but only if you catch it early." She remembered asking, "What if you do?" He'd hesitated, smiled a sad smile, then ruffled her hair. "Let's just say things get turbulent." That same sound filled her ear now. Her blood ran cold. Passengers around her started to panic quietly. A woman in 19A clutched her husband's arm. "Something's wrong," he sounded scared. A college kid unwrapped gum with shaking fingers, whispering, "Why a fighter pilot? That's so specific." A man stood up, frantic, scanning the aisle as if a hero would magically raise a hand. Brooke's breath quickened. She wanted to say something. She really did. But she was 11. She couldn't stand up and announce, "Hi, excuse me, I know what's wrong because my dad, who was an Air Force pilot, explained compressor stalls while I was 9 and eating string cheese in a hangar." Nobody would believe her. Nobody would even listen. She sat frozen, pulse shaking through her whole body. Then the plane lurched hard. The overhead bins rattled violently. A drink slid off someone's tray and shattered on the floor. The businessman in 17C slammed his laptop closed, eyes wide with sudden fear. Brooke grabbed the armrest as her stomach flipped. That was no normal turbulence. She knew the difference. That tilt, that sudden dip, she'd watched simulations of it on her father's computer. She'd seen how pilots talked about it in documentaries he made her watch even when she pretended she wasn't interested. The plane was losing airflow on the left side. Her father's voice echoed through her memory. "You'll hear it before you feel it." She had heard it, and now she was feeling it. The attendant nearest her rushed down the aisle, trying to look calm but failing miserably. Her hands trembled as she steadied herself on headrests, scanning faces as if hopping, praying that someone would stand up and say, "Yes, I'm a fighter pilot. I can help." No one did. The attendant's gaze swept right past Brooke. Then came the second drop, steeper this time. People gasped and gripped their armrests. Brooke's heart pounded. She couldn't stay silent. She couldn't pretend she didn't know. Her father had taught her for a reason, even if she never understood why. She inhaled deeply, her small shoulders shaking. Then, with a hand that trembled but a resolve that did not, she reached up and pressed the call button. Ding! The flight attendant spun around, expecting a tall, confident adult volunteer. Instead, she found an 11-year-old girl with wide eyes, a pale face, and a dog tag shining from beneath her hoodie. And in that instant, the flight attendant froze, because she saw something in Brooke's expression that didn't match her age. Not fear, determination, and a knowledge she shouldn't have. Brooke Tanner had never been the kind of kid who forgot things easily. Her mother often joked she had a steel trap memory, though it wasn't something Brooke bragged about. It simply meant that when someone said something important, or when something mattered, her brain held onto it like a photograph sealed in glass. And nothing mattered more to her than the memories of her father. 6 months before this flight, 6 months before she found herself trembling at 34,000 feet while a plane groaned under mechanical strain, Brooke stood outside Hangar 14 at Peterson Air Force Base, squinting against the Colorado sun as her father walked ahead, strides long and confident. LT call Adam Tanner. Her hero, her best friend, and the best fighter pilot she'd ever known, not that she'd known many personally. He had invited her along for what he called a proper day on base, something he said she was finally old enough to appreciate. She'd been thrilled. She adored spending time with him, the smell of jet fuel, the roar of engines, the way he always knelt to her level when explaining anything. He never treated her like a kid who couldn't understand. "Knowledge is just puzzle pieces," he always said. "You're great at puzzles." That day had been their last perfect one. She didn't know it then, maybe he didn't either. Inside the hangar, aircraft technicians moved like choreographed dancers around an F-16, panels open, tools clanging. The air was cool and metallic, the floor gleaming with oil-slick reflections. Brooke loved everything about it. As they walked closer, her father slowed and knelt beside her, pointing toward the exposed engine. "You see that?" he asked. Brooke nodded, eyes wide. "That's the heart of the aircraft. A jet engine doesn't stop and restart like a car. It's a living thing. It breathes air. When something interrupts that air, even a little, it can choke." "Choke," Brooke had repeated, scrunching her face. "Yep," he said, "like a cough, but jets don't cough exactly. They sputter, whine, or overspool." He tapped a panel gently, then pressed a hand to Brooke's shoulder. "And if you're ever around one, and you hear a thin squeal beneath the main engine sound." He paused. "You tell someone fast." Brooke had asked why, and he'd gone into one of his simple but brilliant breakdowns. Jet engines work because they pull in air, compress it, ignite it, and push it out the back. They like smooth air, steady air. If something disrupts the airflow, like pressure changes, bird strikes, mechanical faults, the compressor struggles. When the compressor struggles, the engine loses power. "Is that dangerous?" she asked, her tiny hands gripping his sleeve. Her father gave a slow nod. "Very, but trained pilots know how to stabilize it if they catch it early. Sometimes you just reduce power and let the airflow rebalance." Brooke thought about this carefully, as if the idea were a puzzle piece she needed to fit into the right place. "What does it sound like?" she finally asked. Her father smiled, proud she'd asked. "It sounds like a soft screech under the hum, like metal trying hard to sing but choking instead." Then he'd imitated the sound with uncanny accuracy, a thin, rising metallic whine. Brooke had laughed. "That sounds like a rubber duck dying." He chuckled. "Well, kiddo, if a rubber duck ever screams on a plane, you probably want to get the pilot's attention, okay?" She'd nodded solemnly. "Okay." They walked the rest of the hangar, her father explaining everything he could. What the altimeter did, how pilots kept calm during emergencies, why panic was the real enemy. "The sky rewards calm minds," he'd said, ruffling her hair. Those were the puzzle pieces. But life had given her pieces too, the worst ones. 3 weeks after that day, her father was gone. A mechanical failure on a training flight, they'd said. A malfunction no one could predict, no one could prevent. Her mother had dropped to her knees when the officers came to the door. Brooke had frozen. She'd listened, absorbed, memorized every word she wished she never heard. At the funeral, she stood beside the flag-draped coffin with a brittle stillness that frightened her relatives. But she didn't cry then. Not because she didn't feel, but because she felt too much. People kept touching her shoulder, saying how strong she was, how she had her father's composure. They didn't understand. She wasn't composed. She was shattered just quietly. It wasn't until she was home, unlocking the small box her father had told her was, "For whenever you need me," that she allowed herself to break. Inside was a single item. His dog tag. She clutched it until her palms burned. It smelled faintly of metal and jet fuel. She sobbed until she couldn't breathe, but she wore it everywhere afterward, even to sleep. Especially to sleep. Which is why, now months later, sitting on a trembling aircraft at 34,000 feet, that piece of metal rested heavy against her chest, its edges familiar against her fingertips. And why, when the captain asked if any fighter pilots were on board, something inside her cracked open. Not fear. Memory. On this flight, she hadn't talked to anyone except her mom earlier, who was sitting 3 rows ahead and 2 seats over. She insisted Brooke sit near the window so she could enjoy the view, but Brooke knew it was partly because her mom wanted a tiny moment of peace. She worked so much, slept so little. Brooke didn't blame her. And now here she was, alone in her row, gripping her father's dog tag while everything around her trembled. She didn't want to think about the sound she heard under the engine. She didn't want to think about the puzzle pieces her father had placed in her mind like breadcrumbs. But she couldn't ignore them. A compression stall starts quiet, barely noticeable. Only people who knew what to hear would catch it early. And Brooke knew. She didn't want to know. She wanted to be a kid again, just watching cartoons, eating snacks and worrying about homework instead of engine malfunctions and fighter pilots. But the knowledge was there. And knowledge demanded responsibility. As the plane shuddered, the captain's voice filled her mind. "Is there any fighter pilot on board?" The words echoed like a plea. She looked around. No one stood. No one raised a hand. No one even pretended to have military skills. Of course not. What were the odds? Her breath came in short bursts. Her hands shook so violently she pressed them against her thighs to steady them. Her father's voice whispered through her memory. "If you ever hear it, you tell someone." Brooke's pulse hammered. She curled her fingers around the call button, but hesitated. She was 11. Who would listen? She closed her eyes. She pictured her father kneeling in the hangar, explaining patiently, lovingly, as if she had all the time in the world. "You'll hear it before you feel it." Her eyes opened. She heard it. And now she felt it. So she pressed the call button. The soft ding rang through the cabin. Passengers looked up. The flight attendant hurried over, expecting an adult, maybe a veteran who looked like they belonged in a cockpit. Instead, she stopped right in front of Brooke, small, pale, wide-eyed, clutching a dog tag with trembling fingers. The attendant blinked, confused. Brooke swallowed hard. Because she knew, deep down, that this moment, the moment she pressed that button, was the moment her life split into a before and an after. And whatever came next, she wasn't ready for. The flight attendant, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes and a name tag that read Melissa, knelt beside Brooke's seat. She expected perhaps a spilled drink, a stomachache, or a frightened child waking from a nightmare. But Brooke wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking uncontrollably. She wasn't even looking at Melissa. She was listening. Her head was slightly tilted, eyes narrowed, brow furrowed, not in fear but in recognition, as if she were hearing something others weren't trained to hear. Melissa followed her gaze toward the left wing, though all she saw was a glowing orange tip light cutting through the sky. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked gently, trying to keep her voice steady despite the increasingly unstable flight. Brooke lifted her hand a little, the dog tag swinging. "I need to tell you something about the engine." Melissa blinked. The engine. Her voice came out higher than she intended. But before Brooke could answer, the plane lurched again, harder than before. Passengers gasped and grabbed armrests. Someone shouted, "What was that?" A tray table flew open 3 rows ahead, slamming into a woman's knees. The infant who had been crying earlier now wailed in full panic. The lights flickered. 3 seconds. Off on, off on. Too long for comfort, too quick for safety. Children began crying around the cabin. A businessman let out a shaky, involuntary curse. An elderly woman clasped her hands in prayer, whispering beneath her breath. Melissa grabbed the headdress beside her to steady herself, her breath quickening. This wasn't turbulence anymore. This was mechanical. And she knew it. Everyone knew it. Melissa turned back to Brooke, who was unexpectedly calm. Scared, yes, but focused in a way no child had the right to be. "Sweetheart," Melissa whispered, leaning closer over the hum of fear rising in the cabin, "what did you want to tell me?" Brooke swallowed hard. That sound under the engine, it's wrong. Melissa hesitated. What sound? Brooke mimicked a soft metallic whine, high, thin, almost like something screeching as it spun. It was disturbingly accurate. Melissa froze. Because she had heard that noise too. She ignored it. Or rather, she had assumed it was normal. Planes made all kinds of unfamiliar noises. But the captain's call for a fighter pilot, that changed everything. Brooke took a breath. My dad was a fighter pilot. He taught me what that sound means. Melissa's lips parted. It didn't make sense. How could an 11-year-old possibly? But there was something in the girl's eyes, something that made Melissa listen. Before she could respond, another wave of gasps swept the cabin as the plane dipped suddenly, not down or sideways but forward, like an elevator snapping downward. People screamed. A drink cart rolled unrestrained toward the back, banging into seats as passengers attempted to lift their legs out of its path. A suitcase dislodged from an overhead compartment and crashed loudly onto the aisle, barely missing a man who ducked just in time. The airplane wasn't flying, it was struggling. A collective panic ignited. Is this normal? We're going to crash. Why isn't anyone telling us what's happening? Help, somebody help. The voices layered over each other, building into a chaotic buzz of terror. The tension felt like static electricity, ready to explode. Melissa put a hand on Brooke's shoulder. Stay right here, I need to. But Brooke cut her off, something she'd never normally do. No, you need to tell the captain, please. The left engine is starving for air. Melissa stared, shocked. Starving for? It means the compressor is failing, Brooke rushed out, voice growing firmer with each word. It's the same thing my dad showed me. If he doesn't know what kind of failure it is, he won't know how to stabilize it. Melissa's pulse thundered in her ears. This can't be right, she whispered. But she didn't sound convinced. She sounded terrified. Brooke looked at her pleadingly. He needs to know. Another hard jolt shook the aircraft, cutting off any lingering doubt. This time, the overhead lights stayed off for 2 whole seconds before stabilizing again. An alarm, not from the cabin but muffled from the cockpit, echoed faintly through the walls. Melissa stiffened. That wasn't a passenger alert. That was a flight deck warning. Chaos spread through the rows like wildfire. A teenage girl clung to her sister, sobbing. A man frantically pressed his call button over and over. A mother clutched her toddler so tightly the child whimpered. A college student vomited into a paper bag, shaking violently. Brooke's mom, 3 rows ahead, twisted around in her seat trying to locate her daughter. Their eyes met briefly, Brooke giving the smallest nod. It wasn't reassurance. It was acknowledgement. Yes, something is wrong. Yes, I'm scared too. But I'm okay. Melissa stood. Stay here, she repeated more firmly this time. I'll be right back. Brooke nodded. But fate didn't give them time for calm. The intercom crackled one more time, and the captain's voice came through, trembling despite his attempted professionalism. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a technical issue. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. I repeat, seatbelts fastened. He didn't say turbulence. He didn't say temporary. He didn't say routine. He said technical issue. And his voice cracked. The passengers erupted into fresh panic, some crying openly now, others whispering prayers or curses or I love yous. Brooke gripped her father's dog tag so tightly the metal dug into her palm. The high, metallic whine under the engine grew louder. It was happening faster than she expected. Her father's lessons weren't just memories now. They were alarms ringing inside her mind. Compressor failure, loss of pressure, risk of stall, risk of flameout. Pieces of information she had tucked away because she admired him, now rising like a tide she couldn't stop. And still, no one had stood up as a fighter pilot. No adult. No veteran. No one. It was one of those surreal moments in life when a child looks around and realizes the thing they feared most. The adults don't know what to do. The adults are scared too. Melissa hurried toward the front of the plane, gripping seats as the floor shook beneath her. Every few steps she glanced back at Brooke, as if compelled, against logic, to trust the trembling child who spoke in a voice that didn't belong to someone her age. The noise under the engine turned shriller. Brooke's breath hitched. She knew exactly what stage of failure they were in. They were running out of time. And before she could second-guess herself, before she could freeze or withdraw or pretend to be just a kid, Brooke unbuckled her seatbelt, stood up, and followed after Melissa. Because fear was one thing, but ignoring what she knew, ignoring the knowledge her father gave her, that was impossible. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a terrifying thought formed. If she didn't speak up now, no one would. The aisle tilted slightly beneath Brooke's feet as she followed Melissa toward the front of the plane. Every step vibrated with a deep, uneven rumble from the struggling left engine, like a giant beast breathing erratically in its sleep. Overhead, lights flickered again, as if the airplane itself couldn't decide whether to stay alive. Passengers reached out instinctively when Brooke passed, some grabbing her sleeves, others clutching the air as though anyone moving toward the cockpit might know something, anything. Is she with the crew? What's happening? Are we crashing? Is she lost? Brooke tried not to look at their faces, faces twisted with fear, desperation, and questions she didn't know how to answer. Her heart hammered so hard she felt it in her throat. Her legs trembled with every step. Her hands were clammy and cold around her father's dog tag. Melissa stopped suddenly, turning sharply with panic flickering in her eyes. "Sweetheart," she whispered urgently, "you shouldn't be up. You need to sit down. It's not safe to walk right now." The plane jolted again, an abrupt, stomach-tightening drop that made Brooke grab a seatback to keep from falling. Gasps and screams tore through the cabin. Melissa steadied her with both hands. "Honey, please, you need to sit." "No," Brooke whispered with surprising force. "I can help. You need to tell the captain what the engine is doing." Melissa opened her mouth as if to protest, but then something shifted. Not in the plane, but in her expression. A realization flickered. She looked closely at Brooke, really looking this time. This wasn't a child panicking. This wasn't a kid guessing. Her eyes were steady, focused, frightened but clear, like someone carrying knowledge she never asked for. "What did you say your father was?" Melissa asked quietly. "A fighter pilot," Brooke replied. Her voice broke on the second word. Melissa swallowed hard. She seemed to absorb that, her face softening and collapsing slightly at the same time. She wasn't supposed to trust a terrified child with technical details. She wasn't supposed to break protocol. And yet, the captain had asked for someone with military aviation knowledge. None came forward. Time was running out. And this girl, this trembling 11-year-old with a cracked voice and a dog tag in her palm, was the only person acting with purpose. Melissa exhaled shakily. "Tell me exactly what you heard." Brooke mimicked the sound again, the soft, rising metallic whine that curled under the engine's hum like a warning ghost. Melissa stiffened. Because this time, unlike earlier, she heard it too. Not Brooke's imitation. The real one. Faint but unmistakable. A sound that didn't belong in a healthy engine. She felt her blood run cold. Brooke leaned in, voice low and urgent. "My dad showed me what that means. The engine isn't getting air, if they don't adjust power or airflow soon." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Melissa grabbed her arm, not harshly, but with a sudden protective urgency. "Okay," she breathed, Okay, come with me. They moved quickly, Melissa shielding Brooke with her body as much as she could. The plane shook again, violently enough that a few passengers screamed louder. A man in a suit leaped from his seat and grabbed Melissa's elbow. "What's happening? Tell us something," he demanded, panicked. "I will come back to explain," Melissa promised breathlessly. "Please stay seated." He didn't let go. "We're going down, aren't we?" Melissa yanked her arm away, not unkindly but with firm authority. "Sir, sit down." The man obeyed, chest heaving, eyes wild. They pushed forward. As they neared the front, a male flight attendant, Tom, stumbled out of the galley, face pale. "Melissa," he hissed, "the first officer's still unconscious. The captain can't leave the controls, His words died when he noticed Brooke. Confusion washed across his features. "What's she doing up here?" "She knows something about the engine," Melissa said quickly. Tom stared at her like she'd announced the sky was turning purple. "She's a child." "Yes," Melissa shot back. "A child who knows exactly what kind of sound the engine is making." Tom hesitated, glancing at Brooke. "Honey, I'm sure you're very smart, but this is—" Brooke stepped forward, tiny hands clenched into fists. "It's starving its intake. The compressor is failing. You need to tell the captain before he tries the wrong correction." Tom blinked. His mouth opened, shut, opened again. How could she know that? How could anyone know that from a sound? Melissa put a hand on Tom's shoulder. "We don't have time to debate. The captain asked for help. If she's wrong, we lose nothing. If she's right." She didn't say the rest. She didn't need to. Tom swallowed, nodded once, and reached for the cockpit door. The small, narrow hallway outside the flight deck felt suffocating, air thick and hot with fear. The door buzzed and unlocked, cracking open only an inch before a strained voice shouted through it. "Don't come in unless you've got a pilot." Tom shouted back, "Captain, we've got, well, someone who might know what's happening." "Someone?" the captain barked. "Is it a pilot?" Tom looked at Brooke. Brooke looked at the floor, then slowly stepped forward. The door opened wider. The captain's face came into view, red, sweating, jaw clenched, eyes wide with the kind of fear only a pilot felt at altitude when things went very, very wrong. When he saw Brooke, his expression twisted with disbelief. "You brought me a child," he snapped. "She heard something in the engine," Melissa said quickly, stepping between them. "She recognized the sound before any of us." The captain's eyebrows shot up in anger and something like desperation. "She's 11. Brooke stepped forward, her voice shaking, but steady. "My dad was an F-16 pilot. He taught me this sound. It's the intake starving, and it's getting worse." The cockpit fell silent. Even the alarm seemed quieter for a heartbeat. The captain stared at her, really stared, like he was trying to decide whether the world had officially lost its mind, or whether the tiny voice in front of him was the only sane one left. He opened his mouth. But before he could chastise her, before he could dismiss her, the plane dropped again, harder than any time before. Everyone grabbed something to keep from falling. Melissa gripping the cockpit door frame, Tom smashing into the galley wall, Brooke stumbling and catching herself on the armrest outside the jump seat. A piercing alarm blasted from inside the cockpit. The captain whipped around toward his panels, reading something that made the blood drain from his already pale face. He muttered, barely audible, "God help us, she's right." He turned slowly back to Brooke, eyes wide, not with disbelief now, but with something far heavier. Trust. Desperate, reluctant trust. He crouched to her height, voice raw. You think you can help me keep this engine alive?" Brooke's fingers tightened around her father's dog tag. She swallowed. Then she nodded. And in that tiny motion, in the trembling bob of an 11-year-old's head, a decision was made that would change everyone's fate. The cockpit door clicked shut behind Brooke with a sound that felt final, like the lid of a treasure chest or the seal of a vault. Except nothing inside this cramped space resembled treasure. It looked more like a command center on the verge of collapse. Warning lights flashed in furious bursts across every screen. The oxygen masks hung loosely from overhead compartments. A burning electrical smell, sharp and metallic, hung in the air. It reminded Brooke of the time her father let her stand beside an F-16 after a training run, the heat distorting the air, the engines ticking like they were alive. Only this time, everything was wrong. The captain jolted in his seat as he twisted around at the sound of footsteps. His face wasn't the calm, professional mask passengers were used to seeing. It was tense, creased, beaded with sweat. But the moment he saw a child, confusion seized him. His eyebrows shot up. What is this?" he burst out, his voice frayed, like he'd been shouting over alarms for too long. The flight attendant behind Brooke lifted her palms helplessly. She was breathing hard, like she'd sprinted from the back of the plane. She says she knows what's wrong with the engine," the attendant said, embarrassment and hope clashing in her tone. The captain blinked hard, once, twice. He looked like his brain literally rejected the sentence. He repeated, incredulous. "You brought me a child. I said I needed a fighter pilot, not." "I know what sound it's making," Brooke interrupted softly. Her voice quivered at first, but to her own surprise it held steady enough. The captain's jaw locked, as if he couldn't decide whether he was furious or just too exhausted to protest. Brooke stepped forward. The dog tag around her neck hung heavily, as though her father's memory were anchoring her against the chaos. "The engine," she said again, a bit louder. "It's overspooling and starving its intake. That's why it's—" she mimicked the stuttering, metallic whine she'd heard. The captain's eyes flicked upward, pure instinct from years of training, and darted to the left engine gauge. A needle hovered dangerously close to a red zone. His expression changed. Not relief, not trust, but recognition. "What did you just say?" he asked, quieter now. Brooke swallowed. "It's the compressor. My dad taught me the sound. It means it's failing." The captain didn't move for 3 seconds. Something tightened in his gaze, an internal calculation shifting, adjusting, breaking its own rules. Then he looked back to his co-pilot slumped unconscious against the harness, his face pale, a small cut on his forehead from turbulence. The captain turned back to Brooke. "Who is your father?" he asked. "LT, call Adam Tanner," she whispered. The captain whipped his head around. "The Adam Tanner." "You knew him," her voice cracked. "He trained my best friend, served in the 302nd. He was—" the captain stopped, cleared his throat. "He was the real deal." Brooke nodded once. A small, sad smile flickered. "He taught me things, not things I shouldn't know, just sounds, emergencies, what they mean." The pilot turned back to the panel, and for the first time since she'd entered, he looked like he saw her differently. Not as a child dragged in by a panicked flight attendant, but as the daughter of a man he respected. A tiny tremor shook the plane. A new alarm shrieked overhead. The captain flinched and returned to his controls. "Damn it, she's losing pressure again." Brooke stepped closer, gripping the back of the jump seat for balance. From here, she could see the entire cockpit, the infinite buttons, switches, blinking icons her dad once compared to a Christmas tree that explodes if you mess up. But she wasn't scared. Not the way she thought she'd be. She was too focused. "What do you need?" she asked. The captain almost smiled at the absurdity of the question. "What I need," he muttered, "is 2 good engines and a conscious first officer." He yanked a lever. The plane lurched sideways. Brooke gasped but held on. "Okay," she whispered, fighting to keep her breathing controlled. "What's happening now?" He tapped a gauge, hard, as if hopping physical force would make it behave. "We're losing stability in the left engine. It's not responding normally. It's threatening a full compressor stall. Brooke felt her heart thump. Her dad's voice echoed in her mind. When a compressor stalls, it doesn't ask permission. It just goes fast. She leaned in slightly, eyes fixed on the screen. "Throttle spikes?" she asked. "Unpredictable ones," the captain confirmed. "Like it wants to quit." Brooke took a shaky breath. "That's the sound I heard." Another shock rattled the cockpit, this one enough to knock a pen from the console. It rolled to Brooke's feet. She didn't move. Her father used to say, "In an emergency, fear wastes time. Let other people panic, you think." So she thought. Really thought. "Captain," she said after 10 seconds, "if it's starving air, then—" I know," he muttered. "But we can't open anything wider without losing more stability." "Is the airflow valve stuck?" Brooke asked. Silence. The captain slowly turned toward her. Not dismissive. Not patronizing. Curious. "How do you know about airflow valves?" he asked. "I overheard my dad explaining it once," she said truthfully. "He said when the engine sounded like this, like it was gasping or grinding, it was usually airflow, something blocking or not opening right." The captain looked at the valve indicator again. A blinking yellow icon pulsed. He muttered a curse under his breath. "That valve is definitely off-cycle," he admitted. "I just don't know if that's the whole cause or a symptom." Brooke tightened her fingers on her father's dog tag. Her dad had taught her one other thing about emergencies. There's always a chain of failures. Find the first link. But before she could speak, the aircraft jolted so violently that the cockpit lights flickered. The unconscious co-pilot's head bounced softly against the headrest. The captain grabbed the yoke with both hands, muscles straining, teeth clenched. Brooke slid sideways, catching herself on a panel. "Is it?" she choked out. "Yes," he snapped. "It's getting worse." Another alarm started chiming, shrill, rapid, urgent. Brooke stared at the flashing indicators, her chest tight. The airflow valve was blinking faster now. She pointed. "That's going to fail soon." "I know," he said. "If it goes red, we lose the engine." Brooke's heart hammered. "Dad, what would you say right now?" And suddenly, she remembered him kneeling beside her at the F-16 hangar, resting a hand on her shoulder, telling her softly, "If you hear the plane whispering, don't ignore it. Planes don't whisper unless they need help." She looked up at the captain. "It's whispering," she said. That gave him pause. A small pause, but enough. He exhaled shakily. "Okay, kid, tell me what you think I should look at." Brooke leaned forward, eyes scanning the cockpit panels. The flight attendant watched from behind her, hands clasped over her mouth. The captain waited. The alarms kept shrieking. The plane kept trembling. And Brooke Tanner, an 11-year-old with her father's bravery burning in her chest, lifted her hand and pointed at the one thing the captain hadn't checked yet. A secondary airflow sensor, blinking faintly as though struggling to get attention. The captain's eyes widened. He hadn't noticed it. Not in the chaos. Not with the alarms. Not with the turbulence. But she had. He turned back to Brooke, stunned. "How in the world?" he whispered. But before he finished his sentence, the engine gave a roar like metal tearing apart. The whole cockpit shook violently. Brooke gasped, and the captain shouted, "Hold on!" The cockpit shook so violently that Brooke thought the entire front of the plane might rip off. A deafening boom chug-chug erupted from the left engine, like metal collapsing on itself. The overhead lights flickered again, then steadied in a dim, panicked glow. Brooke's small hands latched onto the jump seat straps as the captain fought the controls with his whole body. "Not now, come on, hold together," he growled through clenched teeth. The plane dipped left hard, the kind of dip you don't forget, the kind of dip that makes grown adults scream and cling to strangers. Brooke felt her stomach drop. The world tilted. Alarms shrieked in alternating pitches, one screaming, one buzzing, one pulsing like a frantic heartbeat. The flight attendant who'd escorted Brooke to the cockpit lost her footing and crashed against a panel. She yelped, grabbing a support bar. "Captain," she shouted, "passengers are panicking. We need reassurance." "Tell them to brace," he barked, voice cracking. She froze, brace, but... "Gio," he roared. She stumbled out, slamming the cockpit door behind her. Now it was just Brooke and the captain in the pulsing haze of red and amber lights. Brooke forced her gaze toward the engine indicators. The left engine's RPM needle was spiking erratically, shooting up, then nosediving, then spiking again as if possessed. Her father had once shown her a video of a compressor stall, so she'd respect the sound. This was worse. Much worse. The captain slammed a switch and cut a slice of power. The plane jerked with a low growl. "We're losing altitude," he muttered. Brooke had never seen a grown man look this scared, not even on the night her father got the call for deployment. She wiped her sweaty palms on her jeans and tried to steady her breath. "Captain," she whispered, "we have to slow the engine down." He shot her a look, frustration, disbelief, desperation all tangled together. "You slow an engine in this condition," he snapped, "and we might lose it completely." "We might lose it anyway," she said quietly but firmly. He stared at her. And it was strange. Brooke was suddenly aware that for the last 10 minutes she hadn't felt like a kid at all. Not inside, not in her mind. Fear was there, sure, pressing down on her chest, but something else sat beside it. Something sharp, focused, almost instinctual. Her father's voice again. "When you have seconds to choose the option that gives you more seconds." Brooke pointed at the secondary airflow sensor she'd spotted earlier, the small blinking indicator fighting to be seen. "That one," she said, "it isn't lying." The captain glanced at it, then again, then leaned closer. The tiny blip of yellow light flickered like a firefly trapped under glass. "It shouldn't be blinking like that," he muttered. "No," Brooke agreed. "It means the airflow valve didn't open all the way. The engine can't breathe." The plane lurched again, violently enough to make the captain curse. He gripped the throttle, knuckles white. "If I reduce power," he said, "we risk a total flameout." "If you don't," she whispered, "the compressor might explode." Silence. Not real silence, just a strange pocket of stillness in the chaos. The alarm still screamed, the engine still rattled, the cabin still vibrated, but something in the captain's eyes shifted. He looked at her. Really looked. And in that moment she saw him see her. Not an 11-year-old, not a scared kid, but the daughter of a man he once admired. A man whose ghost seemed to hover in this cockpit, guiding them, urging them. The captain exhaled, trembling. "Kid, Adam Tanner would never forgive me if I let you be up here for this." Brooke swallowed hard. "He'd never forgive you for ignoring the truth, either." The captain closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, they were glassy but resolved. He took a breath so deep it shook his chest. "All right," he whispered, "we try it your way." Brooke felt her pulse thundering. He wrapped his hand around the throttle, then froze. "You need to brace," he said. "I'm okay." "No," he said firmly. "Hold on to something solid, this might get rough." Brooke hooked both arms through the straps of the jump seat and planted her feet firmly on the floor. The captain gave her one last look. Then he eased the throttle back. Slow. Very slow. At first, nothing happened, just the usual trembling of a stressed engine. Then, a deep, heavy sputter shook the plane like something gigantic had coughed under the wing. The RPM needle plunged. The engine wailed. The cockpit lights flickered again, hard. The captain swore and fought to keep the plane level. We're losing altitude fast. Wait, Brooke shouted. Another sputter. Then a choking metallic thud-thud-thud, a sound so violent it vibrated Brooke's teeth. She clenched her jaw, refusing to look away. Come on, come on. The engine sputtered again, then went into a terrifying, dead-silent lull. No roar. No grind. No mechanical heartbeat. Just quiet. Brooke's blood ran cold. No, she whispered. The captain froze, eyes wide. We lost it, he said. We lost the engine. For a full second, Brooke couldn't breathe. The plane dipped nose first. Warning alarms shrieked in unison, an awful multi-layered symphony of panic. The captain fought the yoke so violently her arms shook from watching. Mayday, mayday, he shouted into the radio. We've lost our left engine, dropping fast. Request immediate priority landing. Static answered. Then a faint voice. Roger, continue descent runway. But the plane bucked violently again, drowning out the rest. Brooke squeezed the straps until her hands hurt. She'd done this. Her advice. Her idea. Her fault. Her father's voice whispered again. No, not fault. Step 1. Solutions take more than one step. The captain slammed the radio off in frustration and turned to her, sweat streaming down his temples. You still with me? He demanded. Brooke nodded, throat dry. Why, yes. Good, he said, because we're not done, not even close. He pointed at the dead-silent engine indicator. We need that engine back. Brooke stared at the blank RPM display. How do we do that? She whispered. The captain's lips pressed into a tight line. We have one shot, he said, a risky one. The plane dropped again, harder this time. Something clattered loose behind them. Brooke's heartbeat stumbled. One shot, she echoed. Yes, he said, gripping the controls. And if it fails? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Because Brooke could feel it. The plane was falling. And the captain was about to attempt the kind of maneuver pilots only practiced in high-pressure simulators. He looked at Brooke, eyes fierce. Ready. Brooke swallowed. Then nodded. Let's do it. First thing Brooke felt wasn't fear. It was weightlessness. The kind that pulled her stomach up into her ribs, the kind you feel when a roller coaster suddenly plunges. But this wasn't a roller coaster. This was a jetliner 30,000 feet in the air, falling faster than it should. The cockpit tilted downward. Loose papers flew. A binder slammed against the wall. The unconscious co-pilot's arm swung like a pendulum with the violent motion. Brooke's hair lifted from her shoulders as gravity lost its grip. The captain gritted his teeth and forced the yoke backward with both hands. Come on, baby, he muttered. Don't quit on me now. But the plane kept dropping, like a stone thrown off a cliff. What's happening? Brooke asked, voice trembling, fingers digging into the straps to keep herself rooted. We lost lift, the captain said. We're too heavy on one engine, too unstable. A loud bang shook the cabin like a door being kicked open. Brooke flinched. What was that? Wind shear from the stall, he snapped. We're falling into our own airflow. That sounded impossible, terrifying, like the plane was collapsing into the sky itself. Another jolt threw Brooke sideways. She slammed against the jump seat and gasped as pain shot through her shoulder. The alarm screamed louder, blasting warnings she didn't understand, a mechanical chorus shouting that something was very, very wrong. The captain grunted, fighting the yoke. His muscles bulged with effort. Sweat streamed down his face. But his eyes stayed locked on the horizon line bouncing wildly across the display. We need altitude, he muttered. We need time. But they had neither. Brooke looked at the dead engine indicators again. Silent, dark, lifeless. Captain, she whispered, you said there was a way to bring it back. One shot. There is, he replied, but we're going too fast. If I try it now, we'll spin. What do you need? Stability, he barked. A steady descent even if it's steep. The plane pitched again, steeper, sharper. Brooke grabbed the panel for balance. Her knees shook. Why you mean like gliding? She asked. He almost laughed at the absurdity. Exactly like gliding, he said. Except gliding works better when you aren't carrying 200 people and 40 tons of baggage. Her chest tightened. The captain shoved a switch. Come on, come on. The right engine roared, struggling to compensate. The vibrations worsened, rattling through the cockpit floor. Brooke forced herself to think, her father's voice drilling through the fear. Listen before you act. Listen, then act. She closed her eyes for half a second. What did she hear? The right engine howling hard. The left engine silent. The wind whipping harder. The frame shuddering. The alarms relentless. Then she heard something else. Faint, very faint. A soft, choking flutter from the left side, like a machine trying, not succeeding, but trying to catch rhythm. Her eyes flew open. Captain, she said urgently, the engine, did you hear that? He didn't look at her. I'm a little busy keeping us alive. No, I heard something. You heard a corpse twitch. No, she shouted louder, it's not dead. The captain's jaw flexed. Kid. It's whispering, she said, breathless. My dad always said engines whisper before they come back. The captain froze. A fraction of a moment. But enough. Brooke pointed again at the secondary airflow sensor, the small amber light flickering instead of going dark. It's not dead, she repeated. It's starving. The captain's gaze darted to the indicator. Amber flickering, fighting. He swore under his breath. If the valve is partially open, if the airflow is irregular, then maybe, just maybe. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Because Brooke's father had said something else too. If an engine wants to live, don't give up on it. The captain inhaled sharply. We try it, he said. Brooke nodded, heart pounding. What do we do? He adjusted their descent angle, hands steadying with grim determination. We're going to windmill start it, he said. Brooke's breath hitched. She didn't know the term, but it sounded dangerous. What does that mean? It means, he said, we use the airflow from the fall to spin the engine blades back to life. But we're falling too fast. He never looked away from the controls. Exactly. Brooke felt the air disappear from her lungs. This was it. Their one shot. The captain spoke into the radio with a cracked voice. Mayday, attempting engine restart. Be advised we may lose control. Static answered him. He flipped the restart sequence switches. A hum filled the cockpit. The kind of hum that felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Brooke gripped the jump seat so tightly her knuckles turned white. The captain toggled the final switch. Come on, he whispered. Give me something, anything. For a moment, nothing. No sound. No vibration. Just the dead weight of a failing machine. Then, a cough. A sputter. A grinding metallic gasp from the left engine, like a giant waking up after being punched in the ribs. Brooke's eyes widened. It's working. But then, chug-chug grind. The engine shuddered violently. Come on, the captain shouted. Don't you dare quit. The nose dipped again. Alarms shrieked. The cockpit shook hard enough that a loose headset flew across the room and hit the wall. Brooke felt tears well in her eyes, not from fear but from helplessness. Dad, she whispered, help us. Suddenly, a rhythmic pulse rippled through the plane. Soft. Unsteady. But real. Yes, the captain roared, it's catching. The engine whined, coughed, then spun faster. Brooke's heartbeat synced with the rising pitch. Higher, stronger, faster. Then, the left engine exploded back to life with a scream, sending a vibration through the floor that felt like a defibrillator jolt to the whole aircraft. The cockpit lights steadied. The plane leveled slightly. The descent slowed. Brooke let out a sob, half relief, half shock. The captain exhaled so hard his shoulders slumped in disbelief. "We got it," he whispered. "We actually got it." But before relief could settle, he stiffened again. "Hold on," he warned. "We're not safe yet." Brooke swallowed. "Why not?" He pointed at the flight path display, blinking red. "Because we're coming in too fast, and because even with two engines." He paused. "We're still too low." Brooke felt her relief evaporate. "How low?" she whispered. The captain stared ahead with steel in his eyes. "Low enough," he said, "that this landing is going to take everything we've got." Hum of the restarted engine vibrated through the cockpit like a heartbeat finally returning after flatlining. But it wasn't steady. It sputtered, coughed, then steadied again, an uneven rhythm that mirrored the adrenaline pounding through Brooke Tanner's small frame. The captain kept both trembling hands locked around the yoke. His jaw was hard, his eyes bloodshot, but determination burned behind them, fierce and unbreakable. Brooke knew that look. Her father had worn it on the day he left for his final mission. The captain cleared his throat, voice rough. "All right, we got the engine back. That buys us a chance." Brooke swallowed. "A good chance." He gave a tight, humorless smile. "A chance." The plane shuddered violently, like it disagreed. Out the cockpit window, clouds streaked past in watery blurs. Through the gaps, the ground rushed toward them, not gradually, but like a fist being thrown upward. Denver sprawled below, tiny roads, tiny cars, tiny neighborhoods. The airport runway glimmered faintly in the distance like a silver blade. Too close. Too fast. They were dropping toward it with more momentum than any landing was supposed to have. The captain flicked switches, adjusting airspeed, trim, altitude readings. "Mayday, mayday," he said into the radio, his voice steadier than he felt. "This is Flight 392, 200 souls on board. We're coming in hot with partial engine control, requesting emergency services on standby." The air traffic controller responded immediately, the voice trembling despite efforts to remain calm. "Runway is clear. All emergency vehicles ready. You're cleared to land, Flight 392. Godspeed." Brooke wasn't old enough to fully understand the weight of the word Godspeed, but she understood the silence that followed. The kind that meant everyone was praying. The captain pushed the yoke forward slightly to steady the descent. The plane wobbled. A sharp vibration rippled through the left wing. Brooke stiffened. "What was that?" "Stressed metal," he said. "She's tired." "Can she handle the landing?" He hesitated for one fraction of a second too long. Brooke's heart slumped. But then he reached over and squeezed her shoulder briefly, firmly. "We're going to put this thing on the ground. You hear me?" She nodded, even though her hands were shaking. Another burst of turbulence slammed them. The nose veered left. The captain corrected hard, panting with effort. Come on," he muttered, coaxing the plane like it was a stubborn animal. Brooke's entire world shrank to the cockpit. The alarms, the blinking lights, the vibrating floor, the heavy hum of the engines fighting to stay alive, the view of the runway growing clearer, longer, sharper. The captain spoke without looking at her. "You need to brace." Brooke's throat dried. Now. She crossed her arms, tucking her head like the safety card had shown. Her dog tag pressed cold against her chin. "Dad, please don't let me mess this up." The captain lowered the landing gear. A hollow, metallic thunk echoed under their feet. For a moment, nothing else happened. Then the wheels locked with a final clunk that shook the cockpit. "Gear down," he said. "That's step one." "What's step two?" Brooke whispered. He inhaled deeply. "We survived step one." The runway rushed toward them. Emergency vehicles lined both sides. Fire trucks, ambulances, lights spinning like frantic stars in the dusk. The captain's voice dropped to a mutter. "Too fast, too high, come on." He cut the right engine's power to stabilize. The plane tilted. Alarm shrieked. Brooke squeezed her eyes shut, but then opened them again. She refused to miss the moment her father would have fought to see. The ground leapt up. "Hold on," the captain bellowed. Wham! The wheels slammed onto the runway so hard the impact jolted Brooke's teeth. Sparks burst from beneath the left wheel, small, scattered embers that danced along the concrete. Passengers screamed on the other side of the cockpit door. The plane skidded, swerved, fishtailed. The captain yanked the yoke, wrestling the beast. "Come on, stay with me, stay." Brooke felt herself sliding sideways and clung to the seat straps with everything she had. The plane tipped dangerously. For a horrifying second, Brooke thought they would flip. But the captain threw his full body weight onto the controls. The aircraft slammed back level. Tires screeched. Brakes screamed. Every bolt in the plane rattled like it might fly loose. Then, gradually, slowly, miraculously, they stopped. Dead still. No motion, no vibration, just a long, stunned silence. The alarms went quiet. Brooke blinked. The captain blinked. He let out a breath so long it shuddered through his entire body. "Oh my God," he whispered, "we made it." Brooke's lips trembled. Tears she hadn't realized were gathering spilled down her cheeks. We did it," she whispered. He turned toward her, this 11-year-old girl who had walked into his cockpit like a ghost of a pilot he once knew and helped him save 200 lives. His eyes softened. He knelt down slightly, not much, just enough to meet her gaze, and said in a voice thick with emotion, "Your father would be proud, no more than proud. You were the only fighter pilot we had on board today." Brooke covered her mouth as fresh tears streamed down her face. A knock rattled the cockpit door. "Captain," a flight attendant called, voice trembling. Is it safe to open?" The captain stood tall again. "Yes," he said, wiping his face quickly. "Open it." The door swung wide. Passengers were on their feet, crying, hugging, staring at the captain, and then staring at Brooke. A murmur rose. "That little girl. She helped. She saved us." Word spread like a spark skipping across dry grass. The captain put a hand gently on Brooke's back and guided her out. As she stepped into the aisle, people gasped. A few clapped weakly at first, then more joined. Within seconds, the entire cabin roared with applause, cheers, sobs, and gratitude. Brooke froze, overwhelmed. The captain leaned close and whispered, "Take a bow, Maverick." Later, as firefighters escorted them down the tarmac and the news vans swarmed, one headline would repeat across every channel. "Little Maverick saves Flight 392. 11-year-old helps pilot avert disaster in midair." But Brooke Tanner didn't care about the headlines. She walked down the steps slowly, gripping her father's dog tag in her fist. She wasn't thinking about fame or applause. She was thinking about the sky, and how, somewhere, her father had watched her do the impossible. And she whispered into the wind, "I heard it whisper, Dad. Just like you said."